We're on. All right. What is this? All right. Here. Now, I just took off my AirPods because I've been listening to Farsi because I have a discussion at 11 with my Farsi or Persian tutor. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, as we come to the end of the 90-day challenge, what has been my strategy here. Now, you know that my 90-day challenge has been to learn both Arabic and Persian. In other words, to improve in both of these languages. So that's perhaps not typical of most of you who are probably focusing on one language. And I don't think I'll do another 90-day. I shouldn't say that. Who knows what I'll do? But it's tough to do the two languages. So the strategy that I had as I approached the end of the 90-day challenge is I said I would do a video in each of the two languages. So I decided about 10 days ago that I would stop the Persian and focus on Arabic for 5 days so that I could then do my, call it exit interview in Arabic. And if I had too much Persian interference, it would make it much more difficult. So I focused on Arabic. I increased the amount of time I was spending on Arabic, really working on it very hard. I don't know how many hours a day, but first of all, I'm back in Vancouver, so I don't have to go golfing every day. I'm not that keen a golfer. Golfing takes up a good portion of the day, which is what we do in Palm Springs. So I was able to spend a fair amount of the day on my Arabic. And then I had my, interview. And one other thing that I found very useful is rather than trying to capture my discussion on Skype, where the sound level is different, where the picture is sometimes fuzzy, where the connection is sometimes poor, I put my iPhone on my little tripod. And so I just take a picture of myself so that anyone who is interested in watching my interview in Arabic will mostly see me and hear me very clearly, and they'll hear the tutor in the background. And I think that's a very good record. And of my Arabic now 90-day challenge, nearing the end, at the end, call it. And I've always felt, and I want to pursue this idea that we should all have a sort of a portfolio of our progress in a language or of where we stand in a language. And so this record, captured on my iPhone or smartphone, Android phone, whatever, which focuses on me, the learner, with the tutor in the background, is a good record. So if I do another 90-day challenge on Arabic, which I may very well do in the future, then I'll see how much I've improved. So now, of course, I've shut off the Arabic, and the last day or so, and going forward through the weekend, and maybe on Monday I have another discussion with my Persian tutor, I will do the same for Persian. And by the way, I have also in this dash to the finish line, I have increased the amount of speaking I do. So I want to get better at retrieving what I have learned, all the passive vocabulary and so forth. And I certainly, leading up to my Arabic exit interview, I think I had 5 discussions. And there's no question that my 5th discussion was better than my first discussion. And I've always said that while input is how we improve in a language, to speak well, you have to speak a lot. So if I wanted to perform well in my exit interview, then I had to do more speaking. So I probably spoke 5 times over a 3-day period, which is much more intensely than I normally speak. If we look at we're learning. I'm learning as a learner. At LingQ, we're learning. We're learning about sort of the approaches we can take towards language learning. And I think the 90-day challenge is a really good thing to do. To me, if people often ask, how long does it take to learn a language? Well, of course, that depends entirely on what languages you know, what language you're learning, and all this. But if I were to just pick one number, I would say a year. 1 year, all right? So if a year is sort of what the amount of time you need to spend to kind of achieve somewhere between B1, B2, depending on the language, a little longer, a little shorter, or at least to get the sense of confidence that you're going to really get there. I think sometimes we put too much importance on these levels. The important thing is to make that breakthrough so that you're confident you feel a sense of achievement, you're encouraged, and you feel you can just keep on going in the language. And I certainly feel that way in Arabic. I'm barely B1 in Arabic, but I had that feeling in that conversation that I was understanding everything, close to everything. I was able to express what I wanted to express with mistakes, which the tutor corrected, and I'm on my way. Now, unfortunately, I've decided I'm going to go to Ukraine. I'm going to work on my Slavic languages. So I'm going to put the Arabic and the Persian on the shelf for a while. When I get back to it, it'll take me a while to bring back up what I've done, but it won't be lost, and I'll be eventually stronger than ever. But so it's a year. Well, if 1 year is the sort of, that's your mile, that's your 1,500 meters, it's a long distance run, eventually it's a marathon, but to get to at least a decent level, it's a mile. It's 1,500 meters, 1,600 meters for the sake of calculation. So the 90-day challenge is a quarter mile. It's 400 meters. So that's kind of how I look at it. So if you're focusing on that period, whereas normally you might be running more slowly if it's a marathon or even a mile, but for the 400 meters, you've stepped it up a notch. It's a 400 meter, which is kind of between. All right, we're back, I think, I hope. For whatever reason, the connection disappeared. So as I was saying, so the 90-day challenge is a 400-yard dash or a 400-meter dash, half distance. Then this last dash to the finish line is a sprint. So I really step it up, all right? I step it up with the intention of having this exit interview, call it this discussion with a tutor, so that I can use my iPhone or Android and create a record of what I have achieved in these 90 days. So the other thing I should point out is, I've often said that language learning is like a jigsaw puzzle. And the more things you put into place, the more things you have, the more new things you notice. So as part of, now that I'm working towards this exit interview, a record of what I have achieved in the 90 days, I'm not so interested in acquiring new words. I want to consolidate what I have learned. So I review, obviously I've gone through, the mini stories. I've gone through who is she. And every time you listen to very familiar material, you always notice something new, something that you hadn't seen before, or you hadn't noticed, or you'd seen and forgotten. So it's very useful to review in that way. But I also review, because when I study a language, I also buy books, and I recommend it. I mean, LingQ is only one tool, a powerful tool where I spend most of my time, but it's not the only thing I use. So for Persian, for example, this series here, Living Language, it has in their audio, they have sort of grammar exercises. Now, when I first listened to these grammar exercises, they made very little impression on me. For example, the subjunctive in Persian, they have examples and you're supposed to repeat, which I never do. But now that I've seen this in action, so then I go back and I'm listening, and I went to the gym yesterday and I'm listening, and I'm cleaning up after breakfast and I'm listening. And of course I hear a lot of things, words that I don't know, or aspects of the grammar that, it's very sort of beneficial to hear these things repeated. Now I want to go back in and read again. The other thing is, whether it be this book or my Asimil, which I've gone through, or my colloquial Persian, whereas before I found it very difficult to read in the book because, it's a new writing system. If I read on LingQ, I can well, of course, in Persian, there's no text-to-speech, but in Arabic, there's text-to-speech. But at the very least, I can look up every word and see the meaning. And then I can hear, right then and there, I can then hear the audio. But now I find that I'm much better able to read just on a book. So I'm getting rid of my training wheels, and I'm starting to be able to read. Now, granted, it's material that I've gone over before, but still, I sense that increasing ability to read in the new language. So, you know, all of this review is very helpful. And I think that sort of dash to the finish line of the 90-day challenge might be usefully spent then on review to consolidate what you've learned. In the long haul, I still need to acquire far more words, both in Arabic and Persian. In Arabic, I can't really understand the political podcast that I listen to. I understand a third of it or something. So I need to acquire a lot more words. But having been through this 90-day challenge and this 400-yard dash, I'm now approaching the finish line. So I crank it up. And I crank it up more in terms of reviewing what I've already gone over and which I have forgotten, and trying to get that consolidated as I cross the finish line. And then I have this exit interview, and I will do my exit interview in Persian probably on Monday. So that gives me the weekend, although I'm playing golf Monday, or Saturday and Sunday. But I hope to have enough time to review Persian so that I don't do too badly in my Persian discussion on Monday. And that will be the end of my 90-day challenge. And on Monday, I'll review some of my statistics, and we can talk about all of our experience in the 90-day challenge. So with that, I will now see what sorts of questions we've got here. So let's go to the top. Evening from Poland. Good evening from Poland, from Japan. You are a very good teacher. Thank you. Hello, good afternoon, Steve. It's nice to see you. Здравствуйте. Как вы думаете? Способен ли человек, которому арабский не родной, овладеть им в полном совершенстве? You know, is it possible for someone who is not a native speaker of Arabic to become perfect, master Arabic? You know, I have no idea. I know lots of people who are absolutely fluent in Chinese and Japanese, which are difficult languages. I consider myself very fluent in Japanese, quite fluent in Chinese. I can't see why a non-native speaker of Arabic couldn't become very fluent in that language. I never consider, you know, speaking like a native, like 100% like a native. I don't see that as a realistic goal for most people. Some people may achieve it, but to become very good in the language, to understand very well, to express oneself very well, I think that is very, very doable. Hi, Steve. Do you recommend doing meditation to enhance it? Blah, blah, blah. I've started doing it and I feel much better. Okay. I don't do meditation, so I can't comment. I have no experience with meditation, so there's very little I can say there. Mark Chavez. Hi, Steve. What do you think about giving people a medal or a badge or something to people who reach different milestones in listening on LingQ? I think it would be motivate. All right. We do have some kind of recognition on the website. We could probably do a better job, Mark. I will speak to Mark and see what we can do. Yeah, que paso? I see. That's when suddenly my internet connection went out and I had to reconnect here. Good. How difficult to? What German learning books can you recommend? You know, it's been so long since I did German. But if you follow what I have done with Arabic and Persian and Greek and Romanian and all these languages, Ukrainian, Polish, whatever. Fundamentally, I use LingQ. I use the mini stories. I feel that I keep on stressing this, but in my own experience, the mini stories have tremendously accelerated my learning because of the amount of repetition, because how many times I listen to them and so forth. But I also do get other books. So get something in your language. If you're not an English speaker, you can get something in whatever your native language is, sort of what I call starter books. The starter books, and I will usually buy more than one because the starter books cover more or less the same material. They have similar content items, you know, at the airport, at the restaurant, whatever, introducing your family. A lot of that is not very useful vocabulary, but it is content. And then they introduce some basic concepts about the language, which we look at and forget. It doesn't matter, but it's an introduction to the language. And I find that's a good companion to LingQ. So what you choose to buy, just go into a bookstore or go to your library and get something. Any starter book will do, and then work with LingQ. That's what I would recommend. Hello, my teacher. How are you doing? Learning Arabic very fast. God save my teacher. Do you know the line? I have 500 names in Arabic. I don't know that, but I'm not going to learn them all either. Learning kanji before starting listening and reading grammar was instrumental. Even if you just learn directly the meaning, it makes your language learning enjoyable later on. Yes, learn the kanji like I mean, not before, because it's simply too boring to just do the kanji. So, but as a major initial effort in learning at least, I don't know, 500, 1,000 kanji as you are getting in, introduced to the language is very important. And if you can also be doing some basic listening and reading, you'll start to recognize some of those kanji that you are learning. But the kanji learning is a separate activity. It is reinforced by your listening and reading, but it needs to be a special area of concentration. And within the first 3 months, let's say, you should have 1,000 of them. And for 6 months, you should have 2,000 of them, in my opinion. Steve, can you recommend a book for Hebrew? No, I can't, but one of our members, Alisa from Israel, has added a bunch of interesting stuff on Hebrew in our Hebrew library at LingQ. And there was an active forum where people were discussing these contents, and you could ask there. Do you think it is necessary to learn the pronunciation of each kanji or learning the meaning? Learning the kanji is a bit like learning words. When we first meet a word or a kanji, we learn a part of the meaning of that word, a part of how it's used. And that's true in every language. And only when we have then seen that word in many different contexts do we get a better grasp of the range of meaning of that word, which words are used together with it, and so on. So I would treat the kanji the same way. I learned kanji in Chinese. When I came across kanji in Japanese, for the longest time, as when I was reading, I would pronounce it in Chinese. So I knew the meaning, even if it was a kanji that was pronounced, like hashiru. Hashiru has got the zo, and then it's got the ru or shiru or whatever. So I would still pronounce it Chinese style. And after a while, I got used to how it's pronounced in Japanese. And particularly if you're doing it on LingQ, you can actually hear it while you look at it. And so you'll hear different pronunciations of it if you're listening to the actual natural voice, not the text-to-speech. I don't know what the text-to-speech gives you because I'm not learning Japanese on LingQ. But all I'm saying is just get a hint. That applies not just to Japanese, but any language. Just get a sense of what that word, some sense of what that word means, which may be relevant to the text you're reading. Sometimes it isn't. And then you'll come across it again and again, and gradually the meaning, and in the case of Japanese, the different readings will fill out your, grasp of that word. Read your interview with Paul Nation. I looked at the word family he referenced. It looked like up until about B2 level, there were 5 word types per word family in a 1,000,000 word corpus. Okay, I must admit I get confused sometimes, but there is somewhere a discussion of 1.6 to 1. I don't know quite what it refers to. In any case, I think the discussion of word families and words is not that useful. You've still got to learn all the words. You've got to learn activity, activate, action, and they all have slightly different meanings. And I don't see the harm in treating them all as separate words the way we do at LingQ. Besides which, it's not possible always. I think there's a lot of dispute as to whether a word is part of a word family, this word family, or that word family. So to me, it's not a big issue either way. So, blah, blah, blah. I love languages a lot, but how can I concentrate on one? And how do I motivate myself to keep learning that language? You know what? How to not get distracted is not just a matter of how do you stay on one language. If I'm on my iPad doing my Arabic or Persian, I can be easily distracted to go to Twitter and see what people are saying, to check my email. There's all kinds of potential distractions. But you just got to try. It's important to believe that what you are doing is important. So if I'm learning Persian and I think I'd rather be playing golf, that's not very good. If I'm learning Persian and I think this is important, I like doing it, it's a valuable thing to do, I know I'm doing something useful where I'm going to succeed, it's worthwhile doing, I just stay with it. I'm not tempted to go off and play golf. Similarly, I had to discipline myself to spend, 3.5 days on Arabic and then 3.5 days on Persian and not jump around. So I think you just create some habits. Tell yourself, like, be in the moment. I'm happy now. I'm learning this language and I will stay with this language until a certain point. And then if I decide to go to another language, then I'll say that was the right decision. I don't look back, and I then do this language. And I can always go back to the first language at a later date. Okay, but how do you get your motivation? I love languages, but I'm lazy. Good point. We're all lazy. I mean, we all like to do what is the least effort. To me, the easiest thing to do is to listen. And because I can do it anywhere. I can do it while in the car, while jogging, while exercising, while cleaning up. So that's easy. And I particularly like at LingQ now, where you can basically listen to the audio of a course. So I just go into my iPod Touch here, okay, little guy that I carry around with me. I get the whole course on audio. And as I'm listening, there's a bunch of stuff that I don't understand, that I'm curious about or whatever. So that drives me back into the lesson. So I then go and study the lesson. But it's the listening is so easy to do and so easy to find time for, that for the lazy learner, that gets you going. Now I'm curious. And there is no better period to learn something than when you're curious about it. Okay, so that's my only advice there. 30 onwards assumes they're active. Below, no, I think that's not fair. You are not going to activate all the words that you have passive knowledge of. You need the passive vocabulary in order to understand what people are saying to you, in order to be able to read, watch movies, and to continue to grow in the language. You need that passive vocabulary. The amount of vocabulary you'll be able to use in a conversation is going to be a smaller subset of that. What it is, I don't know. A third, a fifth, something like that. Do you recommend to try outputs when visiting Japan, even if you haven't internalized the structure, blah, blah, blah? Okay. Now, you all know that I'm a strong proponent of input-based learning. But any opportunity I have to use the language, I use it. So yesterday I went to my local grocer who happens to be from Iran, and I tried to use my Persian on him. He didn't want to speak Persian with me. He said, oh, very good, ha, ha, ha. I spoke English, and then he said, but I'm interested in French. So how do I say this? So then we ended up, I humored him in French. In other words, you can't control what people are going to say to you, but you can always try, and I do. And I remember at a very early stage in my Russian learning, I was at an airport in Amsterdam, and there was a Russian gentleman there who was, if I remember correctly, he was blind. And there was a car supposed to come and pick him up, and he couldn't communicate in English or Dutch or anything. And with my very limited Russian, I was able to communicate on his behalf to the hotel staff so that they could arrange a car to take him to the airport. There was no choice. He didn't speak any other language. So in a way, from a learning perspective, that was great. So, I always try to use the language when I can, but I don't deliberately set up online conversations until I have a certain level, which in the case of Persian has been 3,000 words. In the case of Arabic was 6,000 words. I used to think it was 10 or 15,000 words. Now, as a result of the mini stories, I feel that in most languages after 3,000 words, I'm ready to start once a week. All right. Hi, Steve. Do books work when it comes to improving one's active vocabulary? I'm just wondering how many books I need to read in English to remember at least a few words. Okay. I mean, you have those words in you, those passive words. The only way they're going to, and some of them will bubble up into your brain. You might say them to yourself. But in order to get better and better at activating them, you have to speak more and more. So the reading and listening, and especially the listening, builds up your potential in the language, but to get better and better at activating that in conversation, you actually have to speak more and more. I hope learning languages like you can give me an advice. How long do I memorize the words of my dreams? I learn languages, German and Spanish. I don't memorize, all right? I've said this many times. I don't deliberately memorize. I don't deliberately try to remember anything. I trust my brain because the brain will sort these things out. You just have to give the brain enough stimulus, enough exposure, and the brain will start to slot these things into place. I don't deliberately memorize. I do go over the same material more than once, sometimes many times. And each time I discover new things. And this kind of helps to, gets the neurons connecting better, but it's not a deliberate act of memorization. Here we have, how many countries have, Steve, any tips on speaking? I find it's extremely difficult to speak in a foreign language. It's frustrating knowing you have the words, but you can't retrieve them. Yes, Mark, that is an essential part of learning a language, that it is frustrating that we can't express ourselves as well as we would like. And that will be with you for a long, long time. And the only way to get better is to continue your input activities and to find more and more opportunities to speak and to not feel frustrated when you struggle. The main thing that I want to achieve is to understand what the person is saying. Then if I struggle, it doesn't bother me. What bothers me more is when I don't understand what the person is saying. Is it will there be a Kazakh course on LingQ, and how do I use LingQ properly? All right, the languages that we put up on LingQ, it's totally dependent on what content we receive. We can't possibly go out and create content for 35 odd languages. So if someone is willing to translate and record Kazakh, we put it up. I mean, we have Indonesian, we have Gujarati, we have Hebrew, languages for which there probably aren't a tremendous number of learners. So we will put languages up as long as somebody will create the content. As to how to use LingQ properly, there's lots. I'm not going to go through it in detail here. You have to begin by understanding that listening and reading are the most powerful, most effective, most efficient ways of learning a language. LingQ makes those activities more efficient and more effective. Details on how to use the site are on the site. Plus, I have a lot of videos here that talk about it. Is it essential to visit the country of the target language and live the experience with native speakers? No, it is not essential. I learned Mandarin in Hong Kong, where there were, in the late 60s, there were hardly any Mandarin speakers in Hong Kong. We have lots of immigrants in Canada who never learn English or French. So it can help. It can help. But you have to be able to take advantage of it. So the better your level, if you do all of the things that you can do on your own, input-based learning, as I've been doing, say, in Arabic and Persian. Now, of course, there is no country where they speak Fusha. That's a bit of a problem in Arabic. But when I was in Morocco, and my Arabic was a lot poorer than it is now, I was able to speak Fusha with taxi drivers. And even though people had warned me, no one in Morocco speaks Fusha, they all speak their local dialect. In fact, I found quite a lot of people did speak Fusha and were happy to humor me, accommodate me, to speak with me in Arabic, even though probably French would have been a better common language for us. But I had to have some knowledge of Arabic. I couldn't just arrive there and expect to speak. I think if I went to Iran, if it weren't so difficult to get a visa to go to Iran, I would improve a lot. I expect when I go to Ukraine in a few weeks here, my Russian and Ukrainian will improve. So being in where the language is spoken is great, as long as you have a minimum level in the language. I'm from Brazil. Hello, full-time fluency. How is your Japanese going? Blah, blah, blah. What are the types of businesses where you or any polyglot uses his knowledge, and what are some career options? My Japanese was tremendously influential in my business career and enabled me to, connect with what we call downstream customers in Japan. In other words, beyond the big trading companies, Mitsubishi, Mitsui, and so forth. It enabled me to do business. It helped my career. It was tremendously useful for me. I did business in Swedish and German and Spanish. a little bit in Chinese. So what languages do for you is it increases the range of opportunities that can come your way. Life consists of taking advantage of opportunities. The broader, the bigger the net you throw out, the more night lines you throw out to catch fish, the more opportunities may come your way, and languages increase these opportunities. But I can't tell you of specific jobs that require you to be a polyglot. What are the types of jobs? Okay, I want to learn English. Fine, that's amazing. Congrats, you're progressing so far. Learning takes time to build a habit. After a month, it was easy to spend an hour a day learning. Yeah, Net Andy CZ, absolutely. Like, it's like going to the gym, you know, working out. The first couple of times, it's very tough, but then you build a habit. And so language learning is like that. You have to get into the habit of listening and reading and doing those things. Do you think Babbel works well? I have never used Babbel. I can't comment. I have no idea. Bonjour Steve, crois-tu que le bilinguisme est en croissance au Canada, particulièrement au Canada anglais? Merci pour vos vidéos. From Gabriel. Do I think bilingualism is increasing in Canada? Probably no. So let me explain a little bit for those who aren't familiar with Canada. So in the 50s, when I lived in Montreal, there was a book written called The Two Solitudes. So you had 1/3 of the city was English speaking, and they only met with each other, and 2/3 of the city was French speaking, and there was a small area downtown where the two would meet, and they would meet, and it would be in English. So if you wanted to work for a large company, you had to speak English. Most English speakers in Quebec couldn't speak French. So this was a tremendous disadvantage to French-speaking Quebecers, and yet they were the majority in Quebec. So the province of Quebec, the government of Quebec, which had prior to then, not even had, like the government didn't even run the education system. It was run by the church until 1960. And so then there was what they called La Révolution Tranquille. Government came in, they set up, you know, Ministry of Education. They increased the importance of French. They made it more important to speak French in Quebec. The net result was that some Anglophones left Quebec. This is all interesting with reference to Ukraine. There are language laws. Wherever there has been a historical injustice, there will be a revenge, and there will be some language laws. And the net result is that today in Montreal, bilingualism has increased tremendously. And you will meet people in downtown Montreal, and you don't know if they are Anglophones speaking French or Francophones speaking English. So downtown Montreal is very bilingual. I think it is less bilingual in other parts of Quebec, where you will come to areas where people only speak French. Outside of Quebec, by and large, statistically, bilingualism has not increased. And that is in spite of the fact that the Canadian federal government pours hundreds of millions of dollars into promoting bilingualism, you know, a ridiculous amount of money, like $500–600 million, which goes to teachers and different organizations and stuff. But bilingualism is not increasing. Other than in the case of the French immersion programs, my grandchildren went to French immersion. That means that Anglophone kids in Vancouver, in Saskatchewan, in Ontario, they go to school and they study everything in French. So obviously those kids who, they don't always speak that well, but they all understand. And so they come through the system having done all of their schoolwork in French. Those people then can become bilingual. However, the quality of instruction in the rest of the school system is very poor. So very, very few kids coming out of the regular system end up speaking French. The net result is that bilingualism outside of Quebec, in other words, Anglophones outside of Quebec who speak French, is around 6%, and it's pretty well steady. And in fact, it's declined. It used to be 7 and it's now 6. And that's despite all the money that the government spends. Now, I suggest that in the school system, they should take a different approach. Don't teach like we had in grade 3, the 16 verbs that take être. You know, I still remember that. Couldn't say anything, but I knew the 16 verbs that take être. They've got to have a different approach. And as I've said before, they should encourage people to learn more than one language, focus on comprehension. which is essentially what the French immersion program does, because they don't speak a lot of French in class, but they end up with good comprehension skills. And if people have good comprehension skills, they can learn the language. So that's a long-winded answer to the question from Gabriel. Steve, I saw the video in which you speak Arabic. I've got to say your performance was amazingly impressive given the previous blah, blah, blah. Exposed to, go ahead. Thank you, Ahmed. I appreciate it. I always accept any compliments or words of encouragement. And it's very important, not only for me, but for everyone. Don't criticize people. Where you can, encourage them, because we thrive on that. That makes me more keen to study Arabic. Most inept English speakers don't have a 30,000 active vocabulary. If you think you do, you're in la la land. Yeah, we don't use that many words active, although passively we could have even more words. How do I not get shy from talking to native speakers and stop switching to English posts? How do you not get shy? Don't worry about it. I mean, it's difficult. People have different personalities. I find that the better I understand, the more confident I am. So if I don't understand, then it's very hard. If I have good comprehension, I'm prepared to go with it. Well, I don't know any Japanese, just Cantonese and Spanish. I'm just gearing up to tackle Mandarin. Okay. For the person who has reserved German, I recommend Nico's Web. Okay, that's good. Really, I found your chance. Since I didn't really know how to stop on my own. Okay, when I start, it's a long journey, blah, blah, blah. Here, I really enjoy your videos. If you had any advice on utilizing, I have no advice. A question on utilizing a language textbook. I mean, I use textbooks mostly for content. And if they have grammar drills, I don't do them. If they have audio with some grammar, examples, like the best way to learn patterns in a language is to hear a lot of examples, not to do tests. That's what I would suggest. Blah, blah, blah. Sure gonna make... Hello from Uzbekistan, where I'm currently on vacation. Good. I can read sentences in foreign language. I can ask foreign speakers many things in story, but I never understand what they reply. Yes, that's why you focus on comprehension first. The most uncomfortable feeling is not understanding what people say. It's not struggling to say something. And if you understand well, if you have good comprehension, you will be able to speak eventually. How are you liking Uzbekistan? Blah, blah, blah. Steve, what do you think of the method called Suggestopedia? Never heard of it. Blah, blah, blah. Now it's, boy, Kali, yeah. As usted, Keifa, Atalam. Okay, it's too difficult for me to read the Arabic on the fly like this. I've never been to this place, blah, blah, blah. What does it mean to be functional language? B2. Kazakh are... Can you reach native fluency? You live in mainland China for a year, only if you study. Living there won't do it for you. Scott Preston. I met Dr. Lazenov when I write a book for mankind research to teacher-oriented systems still used. Learning from a text was ridiculously boring for 98% of people. Steve has it right. Make learning fun for you. Borat was filmed in Romania, has no Kazakh. I mean, yeah. I mean, Borat has nothing to do with Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, that's all Turkic speaking, call it, sort of, it's that Central Asian divide between Asian, like Mongolian and Turkic and different shades of all of that. And I don't know much about it, but it has nothing to do with Borat's film, however funny it might be. How come you struggle to understand Japanese TV after 4 or 5 years? How come? I just do. It's difficult. TV is difficult. You're not in that environment. It's not a familiar environment. They're speaking quickly. I could have business conversations, but I didn't fully understand the TV programs. Can I reach fluency? You're doing it. Okay, at that, I'm going to cut it off here again. I want to work a bit on my Persian so I can warm up for my tutor. And so the last of these sessions will be on Monday. I'm going to review my statistics. I'm going to get your reactions to the experience for you. And I look forward to our next meeting. Bye for now.